Hello, and welcome to the public meeting of the DC Lodge. As always, before I introduce the speaker today, I'm going to invite you to read or recite loud the invocation by Annie Besant so that the vibration gets stronger. But I asked everybody to be muted because it doesn't sound good if it's done over Zoom when everybody reads at the same time. So, O hidden life, vibrant in every atom. O hidden light, shining in every creature. O hidden love, embracing all in oneness. May all who feel themselves as one with thee know they are therefore one with every other. So I'm very happy to introduce today our speaker, Susan Brown. She joined the Theosophical Society in the summer of 1948 and is a life member. She's retired now, and she has 3 children and 5 grandchildren. She has a bachelor's of fine art from the University of Washington, retired from the Boeing Airplane Company after 25 years as a tool designer, and has found a group of amazing, talented painters participating in classes, group shows, etc. She's an active member of the Seattle Lodge in Washington State, volunteering at the Quest Bookshop and on the board of the Seattle Lodge. She has been active in various capacities at Camp Intralaya on Orcas Island since 1952. She also volunteered. She also volunteers. Sorry, I'm just trying to finish this. She also volunteers in the Theosophical Prisoner Mentor Program. Susan's fascination with and understanding of the twin concepts of reincarnation and karma comes from a lifetime of reading. She grew up in Ohio, moving to Seattle in 1952. Welcome, Susan. We are excited. This is a big topic that you are going to talk about. So feel free, please, to share the screen. And then we are going to, yes, that's it. Perfect.
Can you wait a minute.
It's up. It's up.
It's up, but it's at the end. I have to start at the beginning.
Yes, and just go, yes, and then start from the beginning, and there we are.
And can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you wonderfully.
Okay, so the first thing I had to do when I took this on was to figure out how to pronounce the name, because I've heard that pronounced several different ways. The internet is wonderful. It will pronounce words for you, so that's where I went, and it pronounces it Alcyone. But I asked a Greek friend how to pronounce it because it's a Greek word. And the friend said, well, his grandmother would probably say Alcyone. But I'm going to go with the American pronunciation and call it The Lives of Alcyone. Last week, we heard a wonderful talk about the hero's journey. And this to me is another hero and his journey. Because as I was working on this, I was contemplating what makes Krishnamurti Krishnamurti. When you see him talk to physicists, movement leaders, world leaders, crowds of listeners, it's as though he's listening to other voices, or maybe his own higher voice before he answers. In the Mahatma Letters class, and in other classes in the Theosophical Society, they talk about the path and the unknown tests we face. This is the story of one life and the efforts as an illustration of this life and those tests. This is not theoretical, it's real. We have help along the way, whether we know it or not. What I hope to convey in this is the vast amount of time we have, as this story really starts before the lives even start, as there's an anecdote in the book Man, Whence, How, and Whither, in which Alcyone is lured into a black magic orgy in ancient Atlantis. Krishnamurti was born a Brahmin in May 1895 near Madras in the south of India. He was the 8th son and in keeping with tradition was named after Sri Krishna. In January 1909, the Jiddu family moved to Madras. In May of that year, Theosophical leader and clairvoyant C.W. Leadbeater noticed 13-year-old Krishnamurti, who is playing on the beach and sees the most wonderful aura he has ever seen without a particle of selfishness. Although Theosophist scholar and Theosophist Ernest Wood, who had tried to help Krishnamurti with his homework, considered him dim-witted, Leadbeater predicted that he would become a spiritual teacher and a great orator, much greater than even Annie Besant. Soon, Leadbeater started researching their past lives and became aware of the relationship with himself and with the masters. And these accounts were published in the magazine The Theosophist. Charles Leadbeater, born in England, ordained as a priest in the Anglican Church in 1879, joined the Theosophical Society in 1883, went to India with Blavatsky in 1884, where he took the 5 vows as a Buddhist. In 1885, his master gave him instruction to open his psychic abilities. He wrote over 30 books. He and Annie Besant collaborated on many books and studies. In his little book, How Theosophy Came to Me, he describes how his master gave him some meditations to work on during a summer that he was almost by himself at Adyar, and that opened his abilities so that he, as I phrase it, was awake and aware on the higher mental level, because he identifies all these people by their causal bodies, because that's the one thing that doesn't change from life to life. Annie Besant, Annie Wood, born in London. She was a British socialist, women's rights activist, writer, orator, philanthropist. She met Blavatsky in 1890 and joined the Theosophical Society. And she was president of the Theosophical Society from 1907 to her death in 1933. She authored many books on theosophy and collaborated with Leadbeater on many books and investigations. So the Lives of Alcyone it's a 2-volume set, and my mother, bless her heart, she always bought books. So she bought this set of books, and if you can see down at the lower left-hand corner, her name is embossed in gold on the cover. Her name is Nancy Bullock. It's probably hard to see. Anyway, I am fortunate because I have these 2 books. So it's an account of the last 42 lives of Krishnamurti as researched by Leadbeater and Besant, first published as the series of articles, and it's written to link together many lives of persons in consecutive order, throwing light on the workings of reincarnation and karma. All these people come together over life and life after life after life. So Leadbeater assigned star names to the characters to follow them from life to life. They all had their personality names, but talk about the confusion if you tried to add that to it. So how are these investigations done? Characters are identified by their causal body, as that does not change from life to life. The investigators use the faculties of the causal body and simply read the records. Since in many of these stories of the past, investigators themselves have had a part, a second method of inquiry has often been open to them to throw themselves back into those forms of long ago and actually live over those lives, to feel once more what they felt thousands of years ago, to look upon the world from the strangely different viewpoints of an Indian ascetic, an Atlantean noble, or an Aryan invader. So how is it possible to fix the time? It's been done by strenuous labor and by much wearisome counting, usually starting from some point previously determined, and whenever possible, the results obtained have been verified by some sort of cross-reference or by astronomical observations. Errors may have crept in, but the margin for errors is small and no trouble has been spared to obtain accuracy. How are the characters defined? Well, you can't write history without names. And as reincarnation is a fact, and therefore the reappearance of the same individual throughout succeeding ages is also a fact, the ego playing many parts under many names. The recognized egos were given distinguishing names so that they may be recognized through all the lives. They're mostly names of constellations, stars, or Greek heroes. And I was reading in the introduction before I came on today, and here's an interesting little factoid. One of the characters is defined as Pisces. That's Claire Cod, because cod is a kind of a fish. So he gave her the name Pisces. So the names of those who constantly appear in this story as ordinary men and women, but who are now masters, may make these great beings more real to them. They have climbed to where they stand on the same ladder of life up which we are climbing now. They have known the common household life, the joys and sorrows, the successes and failures which make up human experiences. They are not gods perfect from unending ages, but men and women who have unfolded the God within themselves and have, along a toilsome road, reached the next kingdom. We are told that we reincarnate in groups, tribes, families. Leadbeater identifies these characters as a band of servers, that's his term, whose job it is to help at the beginning of the development of a root body type, build new civilizations, and instigate religions. This is not the only such group. He indicates that there are many such groups. When this group of workers has a job to do, in the past, we were in close connection. We lived in the same tribe, maybe in the same valley. But now we're scattered all over the civilized world, but we're drawn together by our common interest in theosophy. How often have you been to a convention of the Theosophical Society and felt like it was one great big family reunion? Another very curious group that he talks about is composed of entities whose link with the clan is less defined, for their connection with it seems often to be more hostile than friendly. A decided instance of this is Scorpio, who comes down through the ages in violent opposition to Heracles, an attitude still maintained in the past life in which the hatred and unscrupulousness were as prominent as ever, though the power to harm had obviously decreased with the passage of time. Because there are 48 lives tabulated, there's no time to describe them. So I will narrate the ones that included portraits. According to a note in volume 2 by Annie Besant, the portraits in the book are done from descriptions of the personalities and painted by, and all I have are initials, MLK, a fortunate combination, artist, intuitive, and clairvoyant. Here is a partial list of the cast of characters. And as I read through these lives and other lives, I have also collected other names that there may be in the 2-volume set, but I have added many other names, so you can see what some of them are. The Mahaguru is the Bodhisattva of the time, appearing as Tot, Hermes, and Gautama. Surya, the Lord Maitreya, present Bodhisattva. Manu, founder and head of our root body type. And I want to point out that Manu is a job description, not a name, because every root race has its Manu. Viraj, the Mahachohan. Saturn, master of the Venetian. Jupiter, now a master. Dhruva, the master of Master KH. Mars, Master M. Mercury, Master Kuthumi. Neptune, Master Hilarion. Osiris, Master Serapis. Brihat, Master Jesus. Venus, Master Rakovsky, Count Saint-Germain. Uranus, the Master Dwalkul. Vulcan, Sir Thomas More, now a master. Ulysses, H.S. Alcott. Heracles, Annie Besant. Vajra, Blavatsky. Sirius, Leadbeater. Now, as Manwes Howenwither states, the children of the Manu were in no sense a primitive people, beginning as they did with many hundreds and thousands of years of civilization behind them in Atlantis, and more years under their own Manu in Arabia and Northern Asia. The population could all read and write, including those who did what we call the lowest work. So before the great catastrophe of the sinking of Atlantis, Lord Vivasvata Manu led his selected band from Atlantis to Arabia and thence to the shores of the Gobi Sea in Central Asia. And this is where the fifth body type was to be developed. So our story starts in 70,000 BCE, when the community numbers about 7,500 people. Many of the lives were ordinary and prosaic. When she was a woman, she married and had many children, but usually managed to have adventures. When he was a man, he was a soldier, a ruler, an adventurer, a teacher, a priest, a householder. A theme that runs through many lives is a search for spirituality and the strength to escape from those who would lure him or her into black magic. Another is the self-sacrifice needed when prevented from marrying someone that either had chosen someone else or was promised to another. From the very first recorded life, he was connected to those who are adepts now, but who were mostly where we are now. And I strongly recommend reading these lives as a window into the far past, as the stories are very long with much detail about the configuration of the earth, the various civilizations, the customs of the time, the clothing, the food, the activities, the modes of transportation, the technology, the religion, etc., that is not to be found in today's history and archaeology. So the first one that I have a portrait for, and I do have the portraits in the book, but I was fortunate to find them on the internet as well. Life number 19. Oh, wait a minute, I have to go back a little bit. Sorry. The story starts, as I said, about 70,000 BCE. And here's where the new body type was to be developed. And here's the basic method, which is a lot like developing a new form of a flower or a new breed of dog. He selected some children from the community and had them move to the White Island for safety, as the barbarian hordes would soon come and wipe out the settlement. He had some articles of value buried so that the savages could not find them. As soon as the children were safely settled upon the White Island, the destruction that the Manu had foreseen fell upon the villages, and the Turanian hordes swept down in overwhelming numbers and massacred the entire colony. He then incarnated into the small colony which was saved, and as he could mold his bodies closer to the pattern defined, he repeated this as he incarnated as his grandchild and great-grandchild, etc., to improve the body type. This basic pattern was repeated until the Manu was satisfied with the new body type. We overleap some 10,000 years from the first massacre and come down to what may be regarded as the final step in the foundation of the root body type. More than once before, what looks like a tentative or abortive commencement had been made, and after a few centuries of growth, the body type was swept off the face of the earth by an inrush of savages. Each time, a few of the most promising children were saved from the massacre to be the seed of the next attempt. The Manu, having no personal karma to hinder him, made for himself each time a body closely approximating the pattern given for that body type by the solar deity. The only difficulty in his way being the limitations imposed upon that body by a parentage, although the best available was necessarily short of perfection. He had to take a wife from the existing body types, and therefore his children naturally fell somewhat below his level in the special developments peculiar to the new type. But he usually incarnated several times in the line of his own descendants, and each time brought the body type near to that type. The last of the massacres took place about 60,000 BCE. That was the beginning of the fifth root body type. The development of the sub-body types is similar, but without the wholesale massacres. And it's interesting to note how absolutely the Manu looks upon everything that happens only from the point of view of the plan as a whole. The massacre of his new body type is to him by no means a matter of regret. It is a necessary part of the scheme. We observe not only on this, but on many other occasions that physical death is not regarded by the great ones at all, as it usually is in the outer world. Our modern tendency is to consider it the greatest of all evils, to inflict it as the ultimate punishment. Those leaders who know so much more than we account it merely as an incident in the work which is being done, or sometimes as a reward for a piece of work well performed. Well, indeed, would it be for us if we could acquire this attitude of the masters of the wisdom, if we could watch with larger eyes and see the truth which lies behind the illusory outer appearance. And I like to say about people, we are all immortal and indestructible. Sorry, my page is stuck. There. Here, the first life that I have a portrait of is life number 19, 22,662 BCE. She was born in Atlantis, the eldest daughter of Mizar and Helios. Her father was an Atlantean noble, born into the eastern part of what is now Mississippi in North America. At the age of 6 months, she was consecrated in a temple where her guardianship was linked to an angel. That promise was for all time, not just one life. She married Sirius, who had vowed at age 3 that he would marry her, and they had 16 children. She was aware of the psychic world and had uncomfortable experiences in that life with elementals from a form of early magic from an evolution lower than the physical. Mercury was a priest in that life and neutralized those elementals. She lived a remarkable life, visiting temples and going on pilgrimages. During a pilgrimage to a temple in what is now the Yucatan, they attended an initiation ceremony by Surya, who blessed all there. Surya also referred to the name Alcyone would take in the 47th life when Alcyone met and followed Buddha. On the way home, her mother died, and the family was distressed because that they did not have the usual acid that dissolved a dead body. And this is one of those little tidbits about history that you get from reading the lives. The ancient Atlanteans had a special stuff that they could dissolve a dead body with. And wouldn't that be wonderful if we had it today? She had a prophetic dream of finding gold, which was true, and the gold supported her and her husband into their old age and allowed them to be charitable. During her last 20 years, she wrote a book in 2 volumes on religious subjects. Life number 20, born the daughter of Brihat and Neptune. Her father was the ruler and priest of a small community. Her horoscope destined her to a marriage to Saturn, a distant relative, and to bear a child of remarkable power and holiness. So her life was directed toward this event. At the age of 15, she married, and a year later, Surya was born to her with great rejoicing over this, and every care was taken for this child of promise. Everything seemed to promise a brilliant life, but when Surya was a year old, the house was accidentally set on fire, and Alcyone, who was not home, rushed in to save her baby and died from severe burns. Life number 25, 18,209 BCE. Twin sons, Alcyone and Sirius, were born to Leo and Achilles on an island in the Sahara Sea in what is now North Africa. It was an advanced kingdom where learning was valued, public order maintained, architecture and sculpture were of a high order, and roads, gardens, and fountains were plentiful. He married Helios and had 3 children. Both boys attended the university, and after graduation, Alcyone was offered a post on the permanent staff of the university. He convinced his father and brother to give half of their huge estate to the university, enlarging and improving it. He recruited teachers from many areas, developed the library, and coordinated with other libraries in Egypt, Poseidonis, and India. He devised and had built a rock tramway operated by water power to convey students to the university and back. He invited professors of the highest reputation to teach. Up to the last, he retained the keenest interest in the university, and his son Heracles carried on the work when he died in his sleep at age 71, 2 years after his twin, leaving a university that lasted some 2,000 years. Life number 28. Born the daughter of Mars and Mercury with an older sister, Heracles. She was part of a migration into India that took many, many years. During the blessing for their journey, Surya the priest told the sisters that this was the first of their lives of expiation, that old karma may be outworn and old wrongs made right, and that death would come to them in a strange and violent way. There's a long explanation of the pilgrimage, which was from the Gobi Desert area down into India. The purpose was to start to Aryanize India. King Mars had banned the old Atlantean religion of the area that they were moving into, which incorporated forms of black magic, because they believed that their rites would make them invincible to the new invaders. Heracles was teaching the deeper knowledge of the Atlantean white magic mingled with the bright gods in her ancient home to some of the younger people, and had included some of the younger priests of the older dark Atlantean faith. This challenged the older priesthood and threatened them. And during a ruse, which caused the absence of the people where the sisters were staying, a mob stormed the house and captured them. The high priest Scorpio of that dark religion, who was secretly hiding in the evil temple, tried to get the sisters to renounce their religion and worship the dark gods in return for their lives. When they refused, they were killed by the dark forces in a horrific blood ceremony, and Leadbeater goes into a lot of detail in the books. It's dark, but it's worth reading. So life 29. Her father was Cetus, a priest of a dark religion. Her mother, Cancer, kindly but anxious. Her childhood was full of vague terrors. At the age of 16, she fell in love with Pollux, a bright, handsome, young, careless fellow who got her pregnant and then left. She had to confess to her parents. Her father was incensed and forced her to marry Scorpio, a black magician who was a medium for horrible influences. Her mother suggested a way of revenge on Pollux, which involved killing her baby and poisoning Pollux in a particular horrible way. At the moment when she was handing the cup of poison to Pollux, who brought his little son for the visit, she realized what she was doing, dashed the cup to the floor, and ran out of the house and out of the town. She ran for miles and miles until dusk, and she saw a house and went there. Achilles, the woman of the house, took her in and told her that she had escaped from those horrors, and she must forget that life and begin again. In a dream, a man of commanding presence, Mercury, spoke words of comfort, telling her that the awful life had 2 aspects, that her sufferings had paid off debts from past lives, and the life had been in the nature of a test to see if her will was strong enough to break through the powerful influences of black evil. She studied deeply the emergent religion of Hinduism and died a renowned wise woman. Life number 30. Daughter of Leo, a farmer and a priest of the prevailing religion, which was a precursor of today's Hinduism. She took keen interest in the ceremonies and saw the forces and elementals involved in them. Her brother Uranus could not see them, so Alcyone described them. The siblings had a lot of religious questions that the parents could not answer, but they had heard of a community of religious teachers that was more rumor than fact. But when they were old enough, they set out to find it. After a difficult journey, they found the secluded Atlantean community and with much begging were accepted into it and stayed for some years until they found out that she was a woman and not a man. And they had to leave the community. They lived close by the community. And later, Uranus had a sacred book from the community that they studied, and their home became a religious center. She died at age 91. Life number 33. Now, this is one that makes me really nostalgic. 12,000 years before the Christian era, there existed in the country which we now call Peru, one of the most remarkable civilizations that the world has ever seen. Here it must suffice to say that under the Inca Mars, an absolute autocrat who reigned by divine right with the result that poverty was entirely unknown, the general average of public health and happiness was out of all proportion higher than any country of the present day. The organization was so perfect that death occurred only from old age or accident. No one needed to work after the age of 45. There was practically no law but public opinion, and no punishment except the expulsion from the community of anyone who by uncivilized behavior was considered to have forfeited the privilege of belonging to it. This most marvelously successful as civilizations lasted unchanged for thousands of years, much as did that of Egypt. We found Alcyone born in 12,093 BCE as a son of Uranus and Hesperia, thus closely connected with the royal family since Uranus was the brother of the Inca Mars. Alcyone was the younger brother of Sirius. He learned reading and writing and calligraphy, and even when he was a boy, he was making some manuscripts for the principal temples in Cusco and was very proud of this. Leadbeater goes on to describe the temples that were vast. Step pyramids usually had a little temple up at the top. He also says that at this point, the only sacrifice that was made to the deity were fruit and flowers, no animal sacrifices. They offered praise to the sun as a manifestation of the deity, but no prayer, as it was supposed that the deity knew best what was good for his creatures. They believed in a progressive existence after death, the conditions of which depended upon the man's actions during life, and it was considered wrong and ungrateful to mourn for the dead because the deity did not like to see his children suffer. Reincarnation was not chiefly present in their teachings, although there were some texts which made reference to it. Mizar, the daughter of Vesta and married Alcyone. As they belonged to the ruling class, public opinion exacted from them ceaseless activity in the interest of the community, and their course in life was practically marked out for them by the mere fact of their birth. The business of this ruling class was always to rule, but to rule entirely in the interest of the people. There was a doctrine in the religious teaching that beauty of form and color was especially pleasing to the deity, and the production of such beauty might be regarded as an acceptable offering to him. Alcyone took up this matter and brought it prominently forward, making this value of beauty his especial gospel. He maintained remarkable vigor even up to extreme old age and continued to travel constantly all over the empire for his educational establishments until a few days before his death in 12,000. This is a life. If you can get to the book and read the full story of this life, it is really fascinating. I would love to tell you the whole thing, but because it's so long, I have to synopsize it a lot. So Alcyone was born in a coastal town called Canura, only a few miles from Puri. He married Ajax, and in the course of the years had a family of 12 children. He entered the temple where they spoke of their deity as the sea-born sun. He was extremely sensitive and to some extent psychic and clairvoyant when young, sufficiently so to at least see nature spirits and sometimes to hear voices, especially one which occasionally gave him counsel at crises in his life. On one occasion, this voice gave him the startling information that there were people living in the interior of the earth, and offered to lead him to a certain cave by which he would gain admission into their dwelling place, or what rather one of their dwelling places. He accepted the offer, but it was unfortunately coupled with a condition that he should tell no one and had to go alone if he wished to do so. He doubted the wisdom of this course, but eventually was able to make the journey with a certain friend, Demeter, who was allowed to accompany him. Now, Demeter was another young priest, a son of one of the chief priests of the same temple, and the original reason of the bond between them was that Demeter could also see nature spirits and could sometimes hear the same inner voice. They could take no servants, only food and tortures, and could tell no one. They found the entrance to the cavern and followed a labyrinth to a cavity so vast that they were unable to see its limits. It seemed to be full of this strange radiance by which they were able to see, so they had to dispense with the tortures. They didn't need them. The people they saw were wild looking and somehow indescribably strange and human. Their color was an unpleasant and curious livid kind of lead, probably produced by the strain diffused light. They had no means of communicating with them except by gestures, but it was evident that their arrival excited great wonder. If these primitive cavemen had ever had communication with any humanity on the surface of the earth, it must have been long ago, for their characteristics at this day differed widely from any of the known races. The vegetables which grew in the cavern and the animals which moved among them were strange to them. These people had no visible dwellings of any sort, nor was it clear that they engaged in any definite work. They appeared to live partly upon the flesh of certain semi-reptilian animals which they caught and ate raw, and partly upon a huge fungoid growth which was exceedingly common, a sort of gigantic toadstool. So our travelers ate the fungus and they found it to be sustaining, but not very good. They were there for about 2 weeks. CWL mentions that these people still exist. So a voice told Alcyone to return home to face another challenge. After that, he went on a pilgrimage to visit shrines. He was shipwrecked. He was captured by cannibals. His sons were killed in front of him. He was captured and enslaved and endured many hardships before getting home again after 3 years, returning to the priesthood. And his challengings included escaping from some of these islands where the cannibals had taken them into a boat. He had no means to propel the boat, so he was floating around for days and days, almost died, finally rescued, probably someplace in the vicinity of China. Couldn't speak the language, didn't know how to get home, finally figured out how to go up the coast and keep asking until he found a boat going his direction, and he finally got home. Life number 41. The daughter of the local Raja, Corona, with twin brother Sirius, with whom she was psychically sensitive. She married Mizar and had 7 children. Sirius also married, and after he became king, his wife Orion and Alcyone were termed the 2 queens and were always together. Alcyone and Sirius were so linked that they were ill together and recovered together and died on the same day. Life number 46. This is one of the most momentous lives in this long series. Even in these, we see much of suffering in this 46th life, and in the next life, we find him playing a humble part in the foundation of 2 of the great religions of the world. And so in studying these lives, we obtain fascinating glimpses of some of the most important periods of human history. Alcyone was born at a place called Drepsa in Bactria. He was the son of a man of high family, Hector, who was the brother of Siva. His mother Bee died while he was young, so that he was chiefly in the care of his aunt Vajra. His chief companion was her son Zarathustra, who was 2 years older, and Alcyone admired him immensely. Ulysses, about the same age as Alcyone, lived on the same estate, so they were all raised together. A small orphan cousin, Mizar, came to live with them, and of course, all three boys at once fell in love with her. Ulysses was imperious and thought nobody could resist him because he was the son of the overlord. Zarathustra was impulsive, eager, poetical, flaming with ardor, yet often by reaction in the depths of despondency. While Alcyone was shy and retiring, loving perhaps more unselfishly than either of the others, but far less able to express it. They all felt great respect and affection for their tutor, Uranus, and Alcyone idolized Zarathustra with all the devotion which a small boy can feel for one a little bit older. Zarathustra was handsome, forceful, striking in every way, full of vitality, yet also a boy of trances and dreams. And from earliest childhood, he saw constantly in these dreams a man of commanding presence and of more than mortal power, surrounded always by glowing fire, the original Zoroaster, the founder of sun worship and the head of one of the great lines of human evolution. He frequently inspired and directed Zarathustra, and on at least one occasion, he so far materialized himself that Alcyone also saw him and was profoundly impressed, taking him for one of the great star angels about whom their religion taught them. This confirmed him more than ever in the conviction that his cousin was destined to be one of the greatest of men, and the sight gave him a burning enthusiasm for the higher work and a living certainty of the reality of the unseen world, which he never afterwards lost. One day, Zarathustra, in a burst of confidence, told Alcyone how deeply he loved Mizar, and to poor Alcyone, this open avowal came like a sentence of death. His heart was bound up with Mizar, yet he loved and adored Zarathustra. He contrived not to show how severely the news wounded him, and went away and fought it out with himself. He knew deep down within himself that Zarathustra's mind was so full of mighty ideas that for him love and marriage were in reality secondary matters, so that he did not really love Mizar as wholeheartedly as Alcyone himself did. But after a long and bitter struggle, he resolved to do at all costs what he thought to do his duty to his friend. So he withdrew himself entirely and went away on a visit for 2 months. And by the time he got back, the marriage of Mizar with Zarathustra had been arranged. After 4 children born to Zarathustra and Mizar, Mizar died, leaving 4 orphans. Alcyone and his mother participated in raising these children. All of Zarathustra's children had turned out well under Alcyone's fostering care, and most of all his love had always gone out toward the youngest, a daughter who resembled Mizar. He yearned to make her his wife, but was restrained by the consideration of the great difference in age. Her beauty brought her many suitors, but she rejected them all, telling Alcyone that she could never love anyone but him. When they went hand in hand to Zarathustra, hoping to receive his blessing, he calmly told them that he had just arranged for the marriage of the daughter with Mira, the son of the old Prime Minister Castor, and that this marriage was absolutely necessary for his reform. Alcyone suffered keenly for a long time. Comfort was brought to him by Mercury, a stranger who was prophesied to come from the West, who had been handed over to his care by Zarathustra. This stranger had been a great surprise to them in many ways. Instead of appearing as a reverend preacher, he came to them in the guise of a young man in the dress of a Greek fisherman. Instead of partaking freely of the princely hospitality which Alcyone was more than ready to offer them, he insisted on earning his living and worked daily at the trade of goldsmith. A wondrous tale he told them, how until a year ago, he had been chief priest of a temple, the temple of Pallas at Agade in Asia Minor. And now, when his city was ravaged by barbarians, that body of his had been killed, and in its place he had entered into this vehicle of a young fisherman of the place who had been drowned in attempting to escape the massacre. So deep was the grief Alcyone felt at his second terrible disappointment. So entirely was he filled with despair and weariness of life that he thought seriously of suicide and had all but decided upon it when Mercury's arrival changed the face of the world for him. Even at first, he felt for Mercury a combination of affection and reverence, which from a proud Persian noble to one who was apparently a humble Greek fisherman was indeed passing strange. Almost at once, Mercury spoke to him of the sorrow which so evidently sat heavily upon him and drew forth from him the whole story of his life. So profound was the impression created upon Alcyone by Mercury that faith sustained him even when after 10 years of arduous labor, Mercury left them and passed on into India, leaving behind him the legend of the teacher who never dies, but shall return to found a new race and to lead his people to paradise. It helped to keep him brave during the dark periods of despondency, which came not infrequently to the soul of Zarathustra, when the prophet bewailed the lukewarmness of his followers, admitted doubts as to the success of his mission, or even the truth of his visions, and it sustained him when Zarathustra was murdered in 1449. When Alcyone died, one of Zarathustra's daughters was with him. Life number 47. Alcyone and his cousin Mizar owned a temple where pilgrims stayed and animals were sacrificed. They disagreed about using the temple as a moneymaker and the animal sacrifice, and it caused a rift of many years and many hard feelings. Mizar's wife Thetis poisoned Alcyone's son, who eventually died, so Alcyone banned them from their home with much hatred and anger. After he became Buddha, the Lord Gautama remembered the king's kindly request and came and preached at Rajira in the year 588. He was then 35, having been born in the year 623. Alcyone and Mizar went to hear him, and Alcyone was immensely impressed and lifted clear out of his hopelessness and depression. The Lord Buddha preached about sorrow and karma, and much of what he said exactly fitted Alcyone's case and wonderfully relieved his aching heart. The teaching eradicated the hate and anger in Alcyone's heart, and he vowed to consecrate his life to bring peace to the world as the Buddha had done. His cousin also vowed to follow Buddha, but had to stay with the family temple and maintain it, but not have the animal sacrifice anymore. Alcyone attached himself to the Lord Buddha, traveling with him. Every vestige of anger and revenge was wiped from the heart of Alcyone, and the qualities of compassion, forgiveness, and true affection were developed in him to the utmost. How deep and essential in his nature was the result produced by this most fortunate of lives may be seen by the fact that the average interval between his lives has been entirely altered by this. Before, it was an average of about 700 years, and since then it's been about 1200 years. Alcyone died in 559 at the age of 71, 16 years before the death of the Lord Buddha in 543. The latter part of his life was passed in unalloyed peace and happiness. Life number 48. Born in India, son of aunt, the family was Brahmin by descent, but Buddhist by religious. And like many Buddhist boys, he put on the yellow robe. At age 15, he was in love with Ajax, but he vowed to become a monk. And Ajax also became a monk, as they decided not to marry, but to devote their lives to the religious life. Alcyone was wrongly accused by Scorpio, who was a woman in that life and tried to entrap him. When it came to the attention of the abbot, Alcyone was sent out on pilgrimages of shrines taking about a year. He had a close association with the revered Arya Sangha and was a contributor to the Book of Golden Precepts, which we know as the Voice of the Silence. He became the temple librarian. He loved books. He preached constantly against the luxury of the times and contrived to do it without alienating his audience, because he never attacked it as wickedness, as other reformers did, but gently and persistently reminded his hearers that attachment always brings sorrow. Often the leader of some of the rival factions would come to him and plead the justice of their cause and ask for his blessing upon their warfare. But his answer was always the same, that no cause, however good, could make wrong right or justify slaughter and oppression. And he died at age 70. So here's back to Krishnamurti, life 49. After dissolving the Order of the Star, he went on to become a speaker on philosophical, psychological, and spiritual subjects. There are many books on his ideas. He always remained on the best terms with Annie Besant. He did not leave the Theosophical Society, but he freed himself from all organizations. He met and conversed, as we know, with many scientists, religious people, and philosophers. He founded several schools around the world, including Brockwood Park School, an international educational center. When asked, he enumerated the following as his educational aims. 1, global outlook, a vision of the whole as distinct from the part. There should never be a sectarian outlook, but always a holistic outlook free from all prejudice. 2, concern for humanity and the environment. Humanity is part of nature, and if nature is not cared for, it will boomerang on humanity. Only the right education and deep affection between people everywhere will resolve many problems, including the environmental challenges. 3, religious spirit, which includes the scientific temper. The religious mind is alone, but not lonely. It is in communion with people and nature. The Krishnamurti Foundation, established in 1928 by him and Annie Besant, runs many schools in India and abroad. And here are some links. Just this morning, I got into this, Anand Golap has digitized all the books, and you can actually get it through the Theosophy Wiki. And that's what I did this morning. I got on Theosophy Wiki and I did a search on Alcyone, and you get pages and pages and pages of information about how the information was gotten, and what Leadbeater said about it, and how he behaved when he was narrating all this stuff and so forth. So way down at the bottom of the page, you get a link to three sources. One because the 2-volume set is broken up into 3 parts. So that's where you can get all of the lives. And I really hope, they are wonderful stories, even if you don't want to read all of them. If you just pull up one of them and read one story, and it gives you an insight into the ancient world that you don't get anywhere else. And I'm hoping that someday some aspiring writer will take one of those stories and make a wonderful science fiction book out of it, because there is so much to learn.
Well, thank you so much for this very informative presentation. And I heard it before, and you are so enthusiastic. I know you're a big fan of Leadbeater. Anyhow, I will put it up. Adrian.
What did I do?
Oh, I don't know what you did. So I muted you, Adrian, in case you want to ask a question. Unmute yourself again. But I just wanted to open up this thing. So Adrian, there is some echo here. I don't know what the issue is. You have to. Okay. Yes. Now we can hear you. Go ahead.
All right. Let's see. Susan, I want to thank you it's a great talk. And for me, it's very special whenever I hear about the Atlanteans. I know it's a very important moment. And I also want to thank you for reminding us, especially for people who live in the intellectual sphere, that much of our spirituality is due from real persons who have real lives. And sometimes we forget that because we're always looking for the meaning, and we're taking real and intellectualizing it. Regarding some of the lives you brought to our attention, Life 30 was a daughter of a farmer. She lived to be 90. There was a princess, Life 19. She died at 84. There was a priest, Life 33. He died at 71. And all of these ages, as you pointed out, were they died at old age, and independent as to whether or not they were land dwellers, working the land, or royalty. So my question is not a very spiritual one, and I think it arises out of the secular world, is despite the marvels of our modern science, our lifespan has not increased. So I'm wondering, what say you regarding is this old age, what we term old age, a constant, fixed by our biological nature, fixed by some other factor? Is it a mean? Can it be extended?
That's probably above my pay grade, but I will direct you to the article that Leadbeater wrote right at the beginning of the Lives of Alcyone. When you pull it up, before you get into any of the lives, he has a long dissertation about these people that are part of the group of people that he's talking about, and about the length of their lives and why they have long lives, and kind of the he doesn't talk about doctors per se or medicine, but I have been told that we have no control over when we're born or when we die, just everything in between. And these people all seem to have long lives because they're busy. They're doing the work of the masters and the solar deity. So they're enabled to keep their bodies as long as possible and have them be healthy. So I got so much information from that beginning part of the Lives of Alcyone. I hope everybody will take the time to read it.
Well, thank you for an excellent question, Adrian, because I was wondering about the same thing. You know, a lot of them, unless, except for when this girl saved her child, died early. And what I liked also about the way you presented this, that very often you said, you shared what particular quality Alcyone learned in each life. And that's the reminder that we have to give ourselves, that there are certain things that that we have to learn in each life. Anyhow, Desiree asked if you could be so kind after the presentation to send me this slide, or just make a copy so that we have the links directly, and I will add it to the recording email, if you could do that, so that people just have to click on it. That would be great, Susan, if you can.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and I also have the I think it's about 2 or 3 pages double spaced of the characters, if anybody's interested in that.
Why don't you send me that, and I can just add it as an attachment to the recording, and then people can. I took a screenshot of it actually, because I wanted to know when you referred, because it was so fascinating that Leadbeater and Krishnamurti had lives together, sometimes as brothers, sometimes as, you know, spouses. And anyhow, Desiree, go ahead.
Oh, in reference to Adrian's comment, excuse me, there's that concept that our souls in each incarnation have a lesson to learn, or growth, you know, the step to go up. And that once that is achieved, then you're done. And so I would assume, you know, like the one lifetime that saved the child, perhaps that child went on to, it was important for that child to be saved, right? And so she was done with her job for that lifetime and ready to move to the next one. Maybe that lesson was self-sacrifice, right? So, you know, kind of interesting if we were to think what was the lesson. And so for the long life is that as the soul, you know, is doing good, somehow affecting other areas in human, you know, the souls and the humanity, that maybe their work goes on, and when they're done, they're done. And so for maybe some of these higher achieving souls, maybe they have a lot to do before they're done with their job in the lifetime. So that's kind of what, the theory that I kind of like to go with.
I also need to point out that the last 42 lives of Krishnamurti, he had hundreds of lives. So it's just a little tiny sliver of some of his lives before he became Krishnamurti.
Yeah.
And if you have the opportunity to read Man, Whence, How, and Whither, he is mentioned in there too. And it goes back, I don't know, a million years, whatever.
Well, that's a good point. I mean, thanks for pointing that out, because we don't want to misunderstand. There are so many lives and so many lessons to learn. Ria, go ahead.
Is there any indication what happens between the lives? Or is there a between?
Well, yeah, there is stuff that happens in between. Leadbeater does not actually address that. But there are books that you can get, accounts of what people say happened between their lives or before their lives. So, and I would direct you to those other books.
Michael Newton has written several. I have read all of his books, and I think Desiree too.
So have I.
Well, yeah, he writes about this. Journey of Souls, I think, is one, but there are quite a few books about that, and it's actually interesting to read about it. Even if theosophists might disagree, that he says that it might not be true, or this is not like Devashan looks like, but I really enjoyed reading those books. Desiree, did you want to add something?
I was going to say the same thing. Life Between Lives is a book, A Journey of Souls. It's by Michael Newton. So if you look up Michael Newton, but as well, Ledbetter did write the little book, The Devashanic Plane, which, as in my understanding, in my interpretation, corresponds to that Life Between Lives. So that's also another reference to that in-between state.
Oh, that is
very important. Yeah.
Yes, that's a very good point. Now the time is over and we can continue, but as always, I wanted to thank you for being here. B, I want to remind you that next week there is no meeting. I will put that in the email because we have Easter, and on holidays our lodge doesn't meet. I hope you will join us in 2 weeks, which will be very different. It's going to be a roundtable discussion. We are not going to record it because we want everybody to speak openly and share their opinions and thoughts. And I will ask everyone to read an article to come prepared to the discussion. And I'm going to go to provide the link is on the website, but I'm also going to provide it in the recording email. And so officially I wanted to end it, but I'm happy to continue. If there are any more questions or comments about this talk.
Okay, I'm going to stop the share here.
Okay, good. Okay. Is there anybody else? I don't see anybody unmuted. Well, it was just, I wanted to thank you, Susan, because I remember when I brought up in one of our business meetings, the discussion if we want to, which talks to offer, and 2 or 3 members said, oh my gosh, that book is so huge and there's so much information, and to synthesize it and to bring it together is amazing. It's hard work, and you did a great job to provide that red thread to see how he developed, and how we always reincarnate in groups, as you said.
I wish we had time to go into more of the lives in detail, because there is so much that I had to leave out. It's really a shame. So that's why I'm encouraging people, if at all possible, look at the website that has some of the lives and just enjoy reading.
Well, thank you so much for that advice. And if there's nobody else, then I will end this. Thank you so much for joining. Whatever you celebrate in the next few weeks, have good celebrations. And I look forward and hope, there's one new message, sorry. Okay, yes, just thank you. And I hope to see you then in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Bye-bye.
That was great.
Thanks, Susan. That
Bye.
was
Have a
great.
great couple
Very
weeks.
fascinating. I know, it's fascinating.
Go read the book.
Okay.
Add to my pile. Thank you.
And